Hi guys, and welcome to Checked Out. I am your host, Alexa, here with my co-host, Jennifer.
Hello, Alexa. How are you?
Doing well. How are you today?
I'm pretty well. It's a kind of a dreary day.
It is. Not the best curbside day, but
that's
what we're here for.
Yep, that's what we're here. Today will be the first day that we've actually done curbside here at Northside in the weather. We've been very spoiled. We've had beautiful days.
I know. I feel like this is just kind of a precursor of...
I know. It's
what's
like,
gonna
well,
come.
You know, it is November.
I know. It definitely makes more sense. And I do prefer this to the 90-degree July heat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was rough. That was rough.
Yeah. So...
I think everyone probably lost counts that day. Those months. What was it, a month or something like we did that? And
I don't think I've ever walked so much in my life. It was wild.
Yeah. Fun times. We'll always have curbside in July.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So, is there any library business we need to go over before we just jump right into what we've been reading?
Well, I guess we should say that all locations are doing curbside. All locations are closed to the public. We are just doing curbside, which doesn't mean that you can't get something faxed or you needed something printed. We can still help you with that. Let us know what you need and we'll help you out. We'll do the best we can during this red zone that we're in right now.
And that is to say also we are recording this on November 11th. If you are listening to this and it is like December or February or January or 2021 or something like that, definitely check our website because this is a moment in time. And while we are red zone, according to the governor, we will be doing curbside only. So that is subject to change on a weekly basis.
Yes.
So check the website, give us a call, and we will let you know what we are doing on the particular day that you listen to this podcast.
Yes, exactly.
So, all right.
Let's go.
Yeah, who wants to start?
I'm going to let you start.
Okay. The last couple of things that I have read since we were together last time, we kind of did this unintentionally, but it was a graphic novel reading month for us both. We did not discuss this beforehand. It's just how it worked out. So the two that I read were wildly different. I guess they both had kind of some similarities, but not really. I read Fake Blood by Whitney Gardner, which was a delightful juvenile fiction graphic novel. It is about a young boy, a young preteen, who has a crush on one of his classmates, and she is obsessed with vampires. And so he decides that he is going to pretend to be a vampire to get her interested in him. Boy. And then he finds out, only after he pretends to be a vampire does he realize that she wants to be a vampire slayer. She's obsessed with vampires because she wants to kill them.
Bad luck there.
So that's a bit of a problem there. It was super fun, really cute. It was kind of like just a nice preteen coming of age story. Super quick read. The artwork was adorable. Highly, highly recommend it. It was super fun. And then the other graphic novel that I read, which again, only marginally related, it is a very much an adult graphic novel.
Yes.
Called Maids by Katie Skelly. If you were to see the call number for it, it's actually not even shelved in the graphic novel section here in the library. It is under true crime because it is based on a true story of the Papin sisters. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Leah and Christine Papin.
I think you're pronouncing that right.
It's French. I don't speak French. It's not my forte. But, so I had never heard of this story. Jennifer had. It's apparently very well known. Not really sure how I missed it. It's about the story. It's two sisters who grew up apart from each other. They grew up in a convent. One, when she was the appropriate age, was sent by her mother to go and work as a maid in the house of this very rich family. And then once her sister was old enough, she went and joined her. And they end up carrying out a couple of very grisly murders while they were in the house. As I said, kind of like tangentially horror related, I suppose, to the J one, but very, very divergently different.
Yeah. And like we talked about before, you said that they use this for talk about class and the bourgeoisie in France.
Very much seen as like the lower classes rising up against the higher classes.
Which is really interesting because you think, okay, that's one thing, but these people were murdered.
Yes. Yes. Very brutally.
So, yeah. But,
But it was a really beautifully drawn graphic novel. It was the artwork is very spare. It's very simplistically drawn, and I think that really is a nice juxtaposition against the really horrific things that happened in this, again, a very true story. But yeah, it was a delight to read. It's a quick read. It's very short, but I encourage you to take time with it if you do want to read it, to just really appreciate like all of the work that was put into. I feel like graphic novels that have very simple illustrations like that, I almost appreciate them more than like the ones that have a whole lot going on.
I think that's almost harder because you really have to edit.
They're
yourself.
Very intentionally drawn.
Yeah.
So I think that it does a disservice to the artist to just kind of like, and just like blow through it. I think that it's really good to kind of spend time with it and appreciate all the work that went into it.
I wonder if the reason why it's that way is it sets the mood to what they have lived through. They were in a convent. This is all, they kind of know this, they're the lower class, right? Their room that they're going to stay in is not going to be it's not going to have anything of the wealth that you would see in the other rooms. The flowers and the stuffy chairs and all the porcelain knickknacks and all the things that these people probably had.
Yeah.
What they're probably going to have is a bed, a sheet, maybe a tiny little place to put their clothes in. That would probably be it. So, I mean, I think it's probably kind of fitting that this is a sparse, kind of drawn, graphic novel.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear your take on it once you read it.
Yes, I'm waiting for it.
Yes.
So I think it should come for me today.
I put it in a hold bin for you yesterday. I'm almost 99% sure that it's coming for you.
I'm super excited.
So yeah, those are the graphic novels that I read. What about you?
So I too went on a graphic novel, Gobble 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 Quest. But I read a lot. Some of them were juvenile, some were teens, some were adult. But I'm going to just highlight two. And one of which is, I want to say that this graphic novel would be shelved in the teen collection or a juvenile collection. I'm pretty sure it's a teen. And it's called Glass Town. And it's The Imaginary World of the Brontes. It's by Isabel Greenberg. And it tells the story of the Bronte family and their fantasy world that they created a town called Glass Town. And it started off, I believe, because the brother got a set of, I believe they were metal toy soldiers. And they were playing with them. And next thing you know, they were like, maybe this could be like Napoleon and this could be this person. And, what would they be like? And what if they weren't like who they were? And they really started to use this, and they loved to draw, and they were writers. And so they create this world. Eventually, Glass Town will break off, and then two of the siblings will be together, and the other two siblings will go together and continue Glass Town. Well, the other two create their own world, and it's really fascinating. And the illustrations, I think, they fit really well with the book. If you ever get a chance, I believe the Royal, I want to say it's like the Royal Library, I don't know if that's in London, has actually snippets of pieces of the real manuscripts that they did of Glass Town. Not all of it. They have some, and some of them are teeny tiny. Some of them they would make little small books.
Tiny little perfectly bound books.
Yeah. And so if you just want to go on a rabbit hole,
just very creative, isolated children.
Yes, Brontes. On the moors of, on the moors. So, I mean, it really is, I don't know, it's a fascinating, I just love reading about it.
And that graphic novelist is wonderful. She has some really, really beautiful artwork.
She does. It's great. Really, I think it fits. It really does fit with the story. I feel like you could really get an idea of their personalities in the book as well.
One of my favorite bits of Bronte, just like lore and history, is the portrait that their brother did of all of them together, and then tried to erase himself out of it. So it just looks like a weird ghost man standing behind the three sisters. Which
is interesting because he's such a part of their lives. In a weird way, they were just really all very connected.
Yeah,
so connected to each other.
Something about that portrait is just so fascinating.
It's very haunting.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So then I diverged to a way totally different, very adult story. Went from like, kids and things, fantasy world, to a very sobering story of elderly parents weighing the idea of taking care of your own family with your elderly parents. And I'm going to probably really butcher this person's name, but I'm so sorry. And it's Yeon Sil Kyung, and the book is Uma's Table. It's about food. It's about caring for your parents, trying to deal with the emotional, just the weight of responsibility as a child to their parents, and about food. The illustrations are absolutely stunning. They're stunning to look at, and he represents all the everyone in his family as cat people. Like their faces look like cats.
Oh.
They're not drawn as like you or me,
Interesting.
They don't look human. They look like they have like human hands and things, but their faces look very cat-like.
Okay.
And it's very moving and very touching. And this is just one moment in time in his life. So it's very autobiographical of his life. So it's really a beautiful book. I highly recommend it.
I just had to Google a picture of the cover while you were talking about it.
Yes,
I was like, now I have to see what this looks like.
You can see like kind of like a cat, like people. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It's very, very stylized. It's not what I was picturing in my mind at all, but it looks really cool. Yeah.
And he is a graphic artist. And so basically this is sort of his way of sort of dealing with his life, kind of putting it down on paper and wanting to be a good parent to his child and be a good husband to his wife and getting out of Seoul, Korea, moving outside of the city and moving out to the country. It's really a really wonderful story, really. Yeah. So highly recommend.
We were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, and the way you were describing it, it sounds like so just emotional and just
is
a really beautiful story.
I did tell Alexa earlier that there's a scene, I don't want to give too much away if you case you read it, but I really, as I was reading, I didn't realize I was crying. And that, I was like, I'm crying. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was really emotional. There's a few scenes in the book that are really very gut punching. Where you're just, oh goodness, you feel for this person so much. I really do. You see him just feeling so terrible about everything that is happening to his family.
I feel like that is such a theme in a lot of memoir or biographical or autobiographical graphic novels is like fun home. Can we talk about something more pleasant? Like
yes.
So many graphic novelists like to kind of examine relationships with their parents through graphic novels.
Which I've read all those books.
And they're all and
they're all wonderful they're all come to a different conclusion in a way. They all care about their parents. But they all deal with what happens so differently. Yeah. And I think it's a road that if you do have a relationship with your family, you're going to have yourself. Yeah. Yeah. I think of that a lot. So I think it's something that you really have to not that these books are going to prepare you for anything because everyone's life is going to be different.
Yeah. Gosh, I hope more people that other than Alison Bechdel. Yes. What's the thing that Alison Bechdel does?
I want the outcome to, I guess you need to resolve if there is any kind of point of these books at all, is that really think about your relationships with people and make amends to people if you feel like you can do that. Because I feel like if you don't have a good relationship with them, and maybe you never will, I think that really is how you break it down for yourself at the end, how well you took care of that for yourself or for the person. And I think it is sort of this idea of digging deep and finding and having some kind of a relationship with your family, I guess, Yeah. You do or you don't. But if you're going to get stuck with taking care of certain people, you probably need to talk a little bit.
Yeah. Communication.
Maybe don't keep secrets from people. Maybe,
Yeah, that would be helpful for sure.
Yeah. Maybe not. Just kind of let me in on some things, maybe.
I'm going to talk a little bit about what I haven't completed either of these books. But I've started both of them. Okay. And they're both the first book in series, pretty different also. We've talked before at length on this podcast about my deep and abiding love of all things romance novels. So, naturally, I'm very excited for the premiere of Bridgerton on Netflix. Christmas.
Exciting.
Merry Christmas to all of us, because Bridgerton is coming, and it's very exciting.
Thank you, Shonda Rhimes.
Thank you to Shonda Rhimes and Netflix for bringing Bridgerton to us. So, in the spirit of Bridgerton coming to Netflix, I am reading The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. It is the first book in her Bridgerton series, which has many books in it. They are as numerous as the Bridgerton siblings. There's a lot of them. So they all need their happy ending. So
there you go.
The first book, again, is The Duke and I, and it is Daphne's book. She is, I believe, the fourth daughter. They're named in alphabetical order. So A name, B name, C name, D name. So we start with Daphne, then we go back and we do Anthony, and then we proceed down the alphabet from there.
That's interesting.
Yes, it's kind of a fun little conceit. Not really sure. I don't know why she started with Daphne, but
maybe that's just what hit her.
There you go. I don't know, but it's delightful. There's just something so comforting about reading a romance novel. I assume it's kind of similar to why people like to read mysteries. You read a romance novel, you know how it's going to end.
Yes.
You read a mystery, you may not know exactly how it's going to end, but you know it's going to be solved.
Yes.
Like, you know...
Well, at least you hope.
Yeah. Well, primarily speaking, the conceit of a mystery is that you will have some degree of closure at the end. You go into a
might not be
novel,
satisfied with it.
Yes.
But
but you will know what happened.
You will know what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, so romance novels is like, I don't have to worry. I know that they're going to go through a lot of stuff, but they will be together at the end. And there's just like, it's just so comforting knowing that nobody's going to try and like trick me. I'm not going to be tricked at the end. I'm going to get the happy ending and that's it. And it's very nice.
It's like if you watch any Hallmark channel, you're like, she's going to pick the good guy.
Exactly. Yeah. She's going to move to the small Christmas town and she won't have to be a big city lawyer anymore. And
Goodness.
don't have to worry.
She'll find the simple things in life, like apple pie and like bakeries.
Oh, Hallmark movies. They're starting to go. I've put a lot of Hallmark movies on the hold shelf for people recently. So everyone's getting ready. They're in the mood, and I think all of us are just ready to get the year over with. We're like, let's get Christmas going and get 2020 out of here.
Yeah, bye-bye 2020.
Yeah, exactly. But the other book that I'm reading, again, it is the first book in a very lengthy series, from what I understand, by Louise Penny. I'm finally picking up the first book in Louise Penny's very famous Inspector Gamache
Very
series.
good choice.
Still Life is the name of it, and it's actually very appropriate. It's set at Thanksgiving, which I didn't realize when I started reading it. I was like, oh, this is very like seasonally appropriate.
You're like, this is perfect.
Yeah, I was like, great. So I'm very much like getting ready for the holidays with my current book choices. I read the first chapter or so of that, and then The Duke and I came in, so I had to put Still Life on pause. I will return to it once I finish with The Duke and I.
you gotta get on that road of the romance.
Yes, I'm
so you're getting ready for December.
Exactly. I've got to prepare myself. I read The Duke and I, but it's been just a long time ago. So yeah, need to refresh my memory before Bridgerton comes out. So very much enjoying both of those books currently. What about you? Do you have any in progress?
So yes, one I just received from Amazon. It just showed up yesterday. Which I had pre-ordered Moonflower Murder, which is the sequel to Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Let's just say tickle me red herring, because I am super excited about this, because really to me, Magpie Murder was probably one of the best murder mysteries I'd ever read. That's saying a lot because I read a lot of them.
Yeah, I trust your judgment.
So I've like literally read the first 2 pages. It was just like it showed up when I got off work last night, and so I haven't had a chance, so that's going to be going real soon. The second book I'm reading, which is a totally different subject, and it's by Jill Lepore. It's called Then, and it's how the Simulix Corporation invented the future. And this is, if you don't know who Jill Lepore is, she writes a lot about truths of things, the real story of things. What's the history to that to get you to this? And this is about basically early computers, IBM, all these different companies who really have a lot to do with what our future looks like today. And I think she's really a good writer, and I think she really can project a lot of information, what might be boring, to entertaining. She's very good at that. I will say that she has a podcast, which I'll mention, which I think is fantastic. And it's called The Last Archive. And she talks about truth. She talks, from the very first sort of idea of crime scene like analysis kind of story of a woman, and what is reported in the paper to what really happened, and what is the truth of the story. I won't say too much, but if you get a chance to listen to even if you just listen to the first episode of The Last Archive, it's very eye-opening, because you realize that here's this woman has been murdered. It's terrible. But when it's reported in the paper, they pretty much trash her. And they also, basically, all they're concerned about was that she had taken a birth control pill, or she had taken something to not become become pregnant. And that became the story. It wasn't her murder. It became that she had done that.
That old story.
Yes. And that is the truth of this story, is that this is just about what the so-called, they wanted to hear about.
Sure.
And so it's really fascinating. And so anyway, I just started reading this. I think it's great. And she's written lots of different things about history and government. But she's somebody, if you're really interested in like American politics and a history of things, she's somebody to look into. Her name is Jill Lepore.
Great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but every time somebody describes a book like that to me, I'm just like, oh, I should really read that. That sounds really fascinating.
It's funny. One of the episodes of the podcast was about early computers and the presidential election, like trying to predict the outcome. And this company, the Simulacra Corporation, had built a mock computer on the news, like I think it was CBS News. And they basically had the people, because it was so big they couldn't take the whole thing there, but they had to pretend like it was in their studio. And they basically predicted the outcome of the election, but because it went against what was public opinion of who they thought people thought who was gonna win, they acted like the computer had malfunctioned.
Oh my gosh.
So they didn't predict anything. And so it made them look bad. And basically they had predicted it correctly.
Wow. Okay.
And so the story is like, they didn't even believe in their public sentiment of one thing changed them believing in their thing, which of their basically their product.
Huh.
Which is a really interesting idea of like, okay, you said you could do it and you did it, but you didn't tell anybody you did it. I could go on and on and on because it's just a fascinating idea of what we know about things and what the background story of something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Okay.
Yeah, so definitely give Last Archive a listen.
So to jump off of that and talk a little bit more about some of the podcasts that we've been listening to. I know we said that we were going to talk about podcasts in our first episode, and we got very just in the weeds and didn't even get around to talking about podcasts.
Yes.
One of the podcasts that I've been listening to for the past month or so, I assume everyone will understand why I've been listening to it, is an older NPR podcast that they did a few seasons of called More Perfect. And it is the kind of diving into the Supreme Court and how it functions and just different cases that they have done over the years. They have a really wonderful episode in the second season about Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes, it was very good.
Yes, and her kind of fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. It's very fascinating. One of the recent episodes that I just listened to, again, this is an older one. I listened to the episode recently, but the podcast itself is, I believe, from like 2012. But they were talking about Gorsuch being confirmed, and I don't remember the actual justice, but they were using that to jump off of whenever John Adams was president, the second president of the United States, and how he knew that Thomas Jefferson was coming in. They were from opposing political parties, and he wanted to do something to stick it to Thomas Jefferson so that Thomas Jefferson couldn't get anything done. And at that point, the Supreme Court was just two dudes like in a basement together doing nothing, basically, and nobody cared about them. And so when he knew,
hey, are you there?
When he knew Thomas Jefferson was going to be the president, he was basically like, well, I'm up in the Supreme Court and there's going to be like 12 of them now. And he was basically up until midnight on his last day as president was signing all of these confirmations and just sending guys out the door to deliver them to his nominees to the Supreme Court to get them their papers and to get them on the court. And he also appointed Thomas Jefferson's second cousin, who he hated, as Chief Justice. So
He really wanted to stick it to
I was like, cool, this is great. And I had no idea.
That's a story. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jill Lepore. I was just like, this is just something that happened in our history, and I just had no idea until NPR told me about it. And it's just like, that's such a great story. Why didn't I know that before?
Especially when we're talking about it now. And
I know.
There's all this idea or talking heads talking about, well, maybe we could add more. Maybe,
you can.
Yeah, and guess what? You can.
Yeah. John Adams did it. He had no problem adding as many Supreme Court justices as he wanted. Like, it was fine. You're the president. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really fascinating to just kind of look at the history of the Supreme Court, learn more about some of the cases that they have done. They did a deep dive into whenever they legalized gay couples because sodomy was illegal in the state of Texas, and they just needed I believe the name of the episode is the imperfect witnesses or something like that. Imperfect plaintiffs, because the two men who they used to fight this case to the Supreme Court were just like wanted nothing to do with it. They did not want to be the poster boys to make gay relationships legal. Like, they wanted absolutely they denied being gay. Like, they did not want it. It was fascinating to listen to.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, really, really interesting stuff. If you're looking for, I know that when you hear the words a podcast about the Supreme Court, it literally sounds like the worst thing ever, and nobody would ever want to listen to it. But it is very fast paced. It's very informative while not just like dragging you down with just facts.
I think that is key to like really, and I think that you want to be able to learn something from it. You don't want to be just bored.
Exactly.
You know?
And I think that's how they kind of accomplish that, is that they're telling stories. They're using linear storytelling to describe to you how different parts of our history came about. And
that's kind of how Jill Lepore does.
Yeah.
I believe that is very effective in entertaining us as listeners, that we're not just, and then this happened,
Yes, exactly. You need to have people to follow to keep your interest in the story and in the history.
Exactly.
Another podcast that I have been just absolutely tearing my way through the archives of is Heavyweight by Jonathan Goldstein,
which is a very good podcast.
It's delightful. It's talking about just like not realizing you're crying. Like, there have been so many episodes of Heavyweight, and at the end I'm just like, oh, how did he make this really emotional? It was so silly before, and now all of a sudden I'm feeling
touched by this.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorite episodes that I have listened to so far is called Marshall. Have you listened to that one?
I don't. Tell me a little bit more. I don't know.
So it's about the movie Russian Ark.
Oh, okay.
Which I had never heard of. My husband did. And he was like, oh yeah, that movie. It's a 90-minute film that is shot in one single shot.
Oh my goodness.
One continuous shot. It's just a camera moving across this series of rooms, and it tells like 300 years of Russian history.
Oh my.
I had no idea that this movie existed. It's apparently very famous. And nobody looks at the camera until the very end of the film, and a violinist turns around, like literally turns around in his seat and just dead on stares the camera down for like a few full seconds. The conceit of this podcast is that Jonathan Goldstein helps an individual remove a heavy weight from their conscience. They go back and they revisit things that they regret or things that they feel bad about.
Right. They want to apologize to someone.
Correct. The irony of this episode is that this violinist does not care that he did that. Jonathan is the only one who cares. So Jonathan Goldstein is going around interviewing all of these Russian filmmakers and people, and they're just like, why does this guy care so much about this violinist looking at the camera? It's wonderful. Just a delightful episode of a podcast.
I'll have to listen to that.
Yes. It's kind of divergent from what Heavyweight usually is. Usually it is Jonathan interviewing somebody individually who cares, and they have to go back and make something right.
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit different than the usual episodes of Heavyweight, but highly, highly recommend the episode Marshall of the podcast Heavyweight.
I will definitely listen to that.
It's very fun to listen to. And again, I mentioned this to Jennifer, I feel like a lot of people who have listened to it, you have to like Jonathan Goldstein's shtick. He definitely is playing.
He can be a little over the...
Yeah, he's playing a character of himself. This is not the real Jonathan Goldstein. He very much is playing up being awkward and weird on the podcast. But if you like Jonathan Goldstein's shtick, you would really like Heavyweight.
It's good.
Yeah, it's a good listen. And the last podcast I wanted to mention, and because there is a book that goes along with it, is the podcast Nothing Much Happens by Catherine Nicolai. And it is basically just what it sounds like. Nothing much happens. Catherine Nicolai writes these beautiful little short stories in which nothing happens. It's just like the one that I listened to recently was just a nice fall day in which you go to your yard and rake leaves.
Yeah.
That's it. And she reads them twice. She reads you the story once, and then she goes back and she reads it again, but slower. And then it is meant to relax you, to help you turn off your mind and prepare yourself for sleep.
Yes. And it's very effective.
It is so effective.
I have to admit, I had been listening to Get Sleepy, another podcast that helps with sleep. I don't listen to it all the time. I do think it's a I think to make podcasts like that work for you, you do have to train your mind, and then you have to listen to it consistently. Like every night, I'm going to get in bed, I'm going to do this. But I did listen to several of those, which I still have them on my phone. I listened to, and I'm like, this is really kind of working for me.
Her voice is wonderfully soothing.
Yes, it is.
She's an excellent reader, and she writes all the stories herself.
Which I thought was really cool.
Yes, she's a very good writer. The book that she wrote is just called Nothing Much Happens. The subtitle is Cozy and Calming Stories to Soothe Your Mind and Help You Sleep. And the book is beautiful. It's got these wonderfully soft, beautiful illustrations in it. She has divided the book into seasons. So there are stories to go for spring, summer, fall, and winter. There are some recipes in here. There are mindfulness and meditation exercises.
Like we said, I believe this would probably be a fantastic Christmas gift for somebody.
I think so too, particularly if they are a podcast listener.
Oh yeah,
but
definitely.
Even if somebody, even if they have no idea what a podcast is, I think
or if they have trouble sleeping.
Yeah, it's a great book. And it's
give them one of those eye things, and then give them that book, and just let them read, and then just have it on their head and pull it down.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, no, I mean, we don't usually do product recommendations on this podcast, but seriously though, this would be a really, really sweet gift for somebody. Stories, it's just full of just her little short stories that she reads on her podcast. Then they're beautiful. So relaxing to read.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, they're great.
Highly, highly. So I'm going to talk 2 podcasts, although I already talked about one, which was the Jill Lepores podcast. But I picked 2 of these because they have a base idea to me that would kind of work with a fictional story, although these are true stories. And one of which is Tom Brown's Body, which is put out by Texas Monthly. This is a fascinating story of a young man who goes missing in a small West Texas town the day before Thanksgiving. He's a high school senior, very popular. He goes missing, and it's a sort of it has this almost a feel to me whenever I listen to it. I believe it's because Skip Hollingworth, who is the writer of the story and does the podcast, has this very soothing sort of Texas voice. And it has this almost feel like if you were just sitting around a fire, someone would tell you the story of Tom Brown. And it's just not so much about him being missing or what happens to him. It's about the town, a very small town, and how it affects the entire town, and how rumors and backstabbing can really change the whole feel of this little town. And it's really well done. So I really I think it's just a great podcast. And second podcast is called Crimes of the Century. This is probably takes all the sort of the sensational crimes of the century. You think of O.J. Simpson trials like that, the Menendez, things that we paid a lot of attention to. But she's going back from the very early crimes of the century. Cases like the murder of Mary Fagan, Leopold and Lold, these murders that basically changed how society understood how things were working, from laws that we have effect, and just sometimes just really terrible history that we have in the United States. And it highlights some really terrible things. And it's really, I can't express how well researched it is. It's really well done. And it's told in a way that's, you get an understanding of who all the players are in the trial, from who the judge is, to the lawyers, to the victim, to everyone. And she does a really great job. It's just great if you get a chance. But it has the reason why I bring it up as almost like a fictional feel is these crimes have been inspiration for a lot of different stories, from plays to novels. Maybe they say it's a fictional count of this particular trial, this particular story. But as you're reading, you're like, oh yeah, okay, that's that case that happened back in wherever. Yeah. It really does give you a better understanding of, especially of different crimes and what was happening in society at each period of time these crimes and trials were committed. Yeah. So it's really fascinating.
Well, I mean, so many novelists lift from from like real actual crimes and horror stories.
Yes,
and, like,
and this is a really good understanding of what the true story is of maybe that story that you read or that play you saw.
Well, it's like Silence of the Lambs, like compiled like 7 different killers into Buffalo Bill. Like
yes, and I'm sure a lot of those trials could be one of the trials that would probably be mentioned.
Yeah, probably so.
You know, so, but yeah, it's really interesting. Really good. Very, very well done podcast.
If you couldn't tell, Jen and I really like true crime.
Yes. We really literally could probably have a true crime podcast.
Oh my gosh. We certainly listen to enough of it. We won't even get into Criminal, which is like the perfect crime podcast.
Yeah, just look it up and listen to it.
Yeah, listen to Phoebe Judge tell you about everything that you've never heard of.
God, don't you just love her voice though?
She's just delightful.
I love her.
I think that's so much of having like a really successful, just like long form podcast that you are the person doing the majority of the talking, is just having the voice for it.
Yes.
Like Sarah Koenig's got the voice.
Yes.
Phoebe Judge has the voice. Like I think that is so crucial to having a successful like individual podcast. Like
I totally agree with that.
Yes. They're just wonderful to listen to.
I guess we'll end on just a quick being thankful, since this is the month of November.
We want to have some kind of a tying together thread for our podcast.
Yes.
Right?
So, do you want to say, give us a little idea of what you're thankful for?
Yes, and we are doing book thankfulness, author thankful. This is like, I don't want my husband to listen to this and be like, what the heck?
You didn't thank me?
Yeah.
This is book related.
So yes. So I wanted to be creative and come up with something cool that I've never like talked about. I'm thankful for Neil Gaiman. He's just...
How could you not be?
I mean, I feel like that is just... He's just like so in everyone's minds at all time. Like he's just such a known figure in graphic novels, and like he does everything.
He does everything.
Truly. And I mean, he is just like... I've talked extensively about Neil Gaiman on the podcast before. I probably have. I talk about Neil Gaiman a lot.
When I think of you, I think of Neil Gaiman.
That's fair. I saw him when he came to Lexington whenever he was touring and promoting The House at the End of the Lane.
Oh, which I love that book so much.
It's beautiful. If you don't like sci-fi or you don't like fantasy and you just like, I don't know about Neil Gaiman, read that
book. Just read that one.
The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I'm sorry, not The House at the End of the Lane. I got the title wrong. The Ocean at the End of the Lane. It's really a beautiful, short, little, sweet book. Read The Ocean at the End of the Lane because it's wonderful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, he's just a delight. When I discovered Neil Gaiman, I was about 11, 12 years old, and I found Coraline. My mother used to always take me to the store to pick up some just like cheap books to read when we went to Florida together in the summer. And I found Coraline on the shelf. It had just come out in paperback. And I remember flipping it over, and Stephen King, and who else? Somebody else did a blurb on the back, and they were authors that I knew. And I was like, well, I've never heard of this Neil Gaiman character, but I know who Stephen King is. And this sounds pretty cool. And it has like the classic Dave McKean, Coraline, super weird, creepy illustrations on the front. If you've ever seen a Dave McKean illustration, you know what I'm talking about. He illustrates a lot of Neil Gaiman stuff. He did the illustrations for The Wolves and the Walls. And
they're so like yin yang of each other.
They
really are simpatico.
I feel like he's kind of, I don't know where Dave McKean went, but he hasn't illustrated anything by him in a long time. Chris Riddle, I think, has been doing most of his children's book illustrations in the past few years. And Chris Riddle's great too. But yeah, I picked up Coraline, and it was just like, and ever since, I'm just like, I'm hooked. Love. I've read every single thing that the man has ever written. The Sandman is like the most perfect graphic novel series ever written. If you like graphic novels, read The Sandman. It's wonderful. It
is. It's probably I think for a lot of people, I'm older. I'm a little bit older. I'm older than you, but I think that is like the graphic novel series that really, I think if you listen or interviewed any other person that loves graphic novels, will tell you that they started reading that, or they loved it, or they finished it all, or at least they read part of it.
It's perfect.
I just think it's like the kickoff of like graphic novel.
And
like,
you have no excuse because it is now an Audible series, so you can listen to The Sandman, and it's soon going to be a Netflix series. So there's no excuse to not read The Sandman. You have to do it now because It's out there.
Don't do it later. Do it now.
A lot of people are going to start talking about it when it comes on Netflix. So
that's true.
You're going to have to do it. I'm sorry.
That's right.
So yeah, I'm just grateful and thankful that Neil Gaiman is a person and that he exists. And yesterday was his birthday. So happy birthday, Neil Gaiman. Happy belated birthday. Yay. I think about him every November 10th because I just know it's Neil Gaiman's birthday.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I used to read... I'm going to let you talk about your thankful. I just want to say that I have a really unhealthy obsession with Neil Gaiman, so I'm just going to put that out there. I used to blog regularly, and I would go home from school, and I would pull up Neil Gaiman's blog, and that was the first thing I did when I would get home from school. I just want to...
You do have a little touch there, Neil Gaiman.
I sent him an email once, and he responded to me. And then I took my printed out email that
Did you put it in a frame?
He signed it for me.
Oh my.
I printed out, I wrote him an email when I was 16 years old.
How sweet.
For writing advice. And he emailed me back literally the next day. And then I printed that out. Like when he sent me the email, I copied and pasted my email and then his email that he sent me back. And I've carried it with me ever since because I'm an insane person. And then I brought it with me to have him sign when he came here to Lexington on his sign tour, and he signed it for me.
Oh my gosh.
And he didn't immediately have me arrested, so I appreciate that. I might have.
You might be on a list somewhere, though.
He seemed to be charmed by me, so I'm just gonna...
Well, why wouldn't he be?
Who are you grateful for?
So I'm gonna name a couple people, and I won't go into too much detail. But Ellen Raskin, who wrote The Westing Game. It's a kid's book. It's a mystery. Mm-hmm. I read it when I was a child, and it pretty much cemented my love of mystery. I read and my other person, Agatha Christie. Of course, you knew I was going to say that. But I read Agatha Christie when I was a kid, going to my grandparents' house, and I would get bored, and my grandmother would say, "Well, go read something," because I always had books with me, and that's how I started reading Agatha Christie. So Agatha Christie, Ellen Raskin, but I have to say, when I read The Westing Game, I just couldn't quit thinking about it and I just wanted to know more, and I ended up reading everything she ever wrote. Unfortunately, she died of cancer. I'm pretty sure it was cancer, and so she kind of started writing kind of later in life. So there's only a few books, but I love them, and I think that she's just a wonderful person. I'm really grateful that she was around.
That she did the writing.
That she did the writing that she did.
Yeah.
And the other person I'm going to mention, since I just realized I should probably mention someone who's alive, is David Sedaris. I absolutely adore him. I've seen him read his stuff a couple times. He comes to Lexington. I've been very fortunate. And long time ago, when I was working for the library, he came and did a talk, and they had a party for him. They used one of the rooms at the library.
I have heard people tell me about
after
this.
hours.
Before I worked here, but
yes, and I have a story where I was on the elevator with him, and he looked me in the eye and said, "This is when he smoked. He doesn't smoke anymore, but he looked at me and said, 'I really need a cigarette. Can you take me somewhere to have a cigarette?'" And I was like, "Yes, I can."
You got to be David Sedaris' smoking buddy.
Yes, and so I took him. I won't say where. Someplace. And talked to him as he had a cigarette.
That's pretty funny.
And talked to him about his sister, Amy.
Oh my gosh. My husband is obsessed with Amy Sedaris. He loves her so much.
I absolutely love her too.
And she has the most delightful manic energy of any human being I think I've ever seen. He
was telling me just like, "Oh, this is what she's been doing right now." And he literally was telling me like things that like happened later that I knew was going to happen because he told me.
That's so cool.
So that's David Sedaris' story. And
David's story.
Yeah, I'm still like freaked out that I got to meet him. But yeah, he's fascinating. I'm very thankful that he's with us with his crazy, amazing, sometimes very touching stories, and sometimes just the funniest stories ever. And grateful for his family who gives him so much inspiration.
I mean, yeah. Whenever I think that I knew of Amy Sedaris before I knew of David Sedaris. And it's just like, Amy Sedaris is something.
She's just, that's all you can say about her.
Yeah.
She's something.
She's really, really funny.
She really
delightful.
is.
Yeah. On Kimmy Schmidt. I know that she's done so much more than that, but her character that she played on Kimmy Schmidt on Netflix.
Yeah.
Like, that's honestly how I think of Amy Sedaris now when I think of Amy Sedaris, just because it was just like it was just so much.
Yeah.
On that note.
I would say that just, and I'm sure when she's at home with her crazy home,
sure,
with her rabbit, that she's probably just like normal.
Yes, I would.
But I don't think you can be her and be completely normal.
She's great. Yeah.
Like,
and
I'm
what
sure
a family to have produced those two people.
It's really amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
But yeah, so that's who I'm thankful for.
I think that was a really lovely note to end our November Thanksgiving episode.
Yes, so happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and hope everyone stays safe.
Mm-hmm.
Please stay safe.
Yes, please celebrate Thanksgiving in a smart way.
Yes, be smart.
Yes, please. We would eventually like to come out of the red zone and welcome people back into our library.
Yes,
so.
We do miss you guys.
Yes, exactly.
We miss you.
So hopefully we will be back again next month and have some more recommendations and things for you to check out from us.
Yeah.
So
hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Bye.
Bye.